Nice Guy Rides here, coming back to you for my second video. I know last time I was headed up to do the exciting thing of taking my motorcycle safety course, and that went semi-well. I got my M2 temporary certification, which is awesome except for the fact that I can't actually use it yet. See, there's a stipulation on here, and it says it right there on the license, that I actually have to have my Virginia driver's license, and I currently have a Florida driver's license, so this is useless to me right now. However, once I get my Virginia driver's license, all I've got to do is wait out the 30-day period, and then I'll be able to take this in and get my M2 certification, which allows me to drive motorcycles on the road. So yes, I passed the course. Well worth the time taking that class. Real quickly, I just described to you kind of how it went. I got there, there was maybe about 3 hours of coursework where they went over, very basic stuff about motorcycles, most of which I already knew. I'm not sure that I actually learned anything in the classroom environment. And then we went out and we rode for like 5 hours. And it was, when I say rode, I mean very basic skills like go forward, that type of thing, learning how to put our feet down. Some of the stuff was a little tricky for me because I have a lot of habits, because I did ride for 2 years. So for instance, I'll just give you a for instance where a very skilled motorcycle rider could actually have some trouble in this class. Well, when you're off-road riding, you learn to kind of keep one foot down when you stop. So if you stop on a hill or something, you can slide your butt off and still hit the ground. But in this class, the safety was to put both feet down to make sure that you had good traction at a stop. So this was something I had to get used to, just not something that I had done before. So even that was a little tricky because you start getting your head and thinking, and it messes you up. So there were several people there in my class, and by the way, the reason I didn't videotape the class was because I wanted my instructors on my side. I didn't want any reason for them to be able to fail me at the end, be like, oh, he's doing some stupid video, guess that video won't go well now, fail, that kind of thing. But anyway, I had a very heterogeneous class, meaning that there were some people that had ridden for a while and there were some people that were brand new. And so we had to slow down, obviously, for the newbies. But even the people that had ridden for a while and were skilled riders did struggle a little bit with some of the skills because, again, they're very particular in how they wanted you to do things. And you had to get used to the way that they wanted you to do them while they're barking commands at you and distracting you and all that. So I would say it was an easy day, but at the same time, I barely passed because during the test, I wasn't going the right speed when I did a swerve. I thought I was looking at the speedometer, but he said I wasn't. So it was interesting. It was an interesting day. I did pass. I was very glad of that. And again, if I had been holding a YouTube camera in everybody's face the entire time, I don't know if I would have actually passed that class. They probably would have been ticked off at me or something. But it was a good day. I didn't really learn a whole lot of things that were new. But again, I had to go through it. I have to have my motorcycle certification if I'm going to even test drive. So that's where I am right now. I'm in this kind of weird zone where I can't really test drive right now because I don't have my license. People aren't going to hand their bike over to somebody who are not licensed, to ride a motorcycle. So that's a problem that I have. But once I get my certification in, then I can start test driving. And as soon as I get my license, I can test drive on my temporary M2 license. Along with the class, and I took it at the Motorcycle Safety Center of Virginia, good place, good people. I also got this little thing, and apparently this is like I can get like 10% off motorcycle gear and stuff like that, so I'll be taking advantage of that as soon as I decide what I'm going to buy. So any local dealer here will honor this apparently. So that was a good thing I got out of this as well. So I just wanted to kind of let you guys know, recap, let you guys know what happened last week, and it went well. Again, I really enjoyed it. Super enjoyed riding again. Hadn't ridden in a long time, and it was good to get back on a bike. So that kind of jazzed me up for this trip. So bikes. Let me go into that really quickly. I'm currently, because of the TAT trail, this is the trip that I'm going on, is 5,000 miles. It requires a very particular bike. I mean, you can do it on a lot of different bikes, but since I don't have a bike, it really gives me this opportunity to pick the exact bike that I want. And I do a lot of research and make sure I pick one that is going to make me happy. And I know that's, you're always going to have niggles about something. There's always something that's going to bother you. But I really think through research, I can pick a bike that is going to really meet the medium requirements here, because it really is kind of a middle ground that you've got to hit with the TAT trail. It is off-road 90% of the time, but it's not like single track technical off-road either. But there is some parts that are difficult. So at the same time, there's a 10% where you're on a highway going 70, 80 miles an hour with trucks flying by you. So you really do kind of have to hit this middle ground. And if you don't, you're going to suffer one way or the other. And you're still going to suffer, but I want to suffer at least the amount that I can. So through my research, I've really kind of narrowed it down really to 4 or 5 bikes. I'm just going to quickly go over them for you. And then I'm going to do like separate videos on all those bikes and kind of break out what I found out about them so that you guys can get a better idea of my thought process. The first thing that when I started thinking about the TAT trail, I had to decide was, okay, what's important? So my important things right now are it's got to be fuel injected. I just decided that I don't want to have to deal with carburetors losing power as they're going over the mountains, which is probably the hardest part you can go over, or having to worry about jetting or any of that stuff. I want to get a bike that will respond to where I am, because you're going from sea level to high levels, I think like 12,000 feet. I mean, like super high up there, and then going back to sea level. So there's a lot of altitude change. I want my bike to be able to do that with me and me not have to be fighting it. The second thing, I wanted to be able to cruise on the highway comfortably, to the point where it's not like I'm not revving like 9,000 RPMs just to get it to go 70 miles an hour, if it would even go 70 miles an hour. So this is another requirement that I'm really thinking about. And I want it to be comfortable on the highway, not get blown around too much. And then I also want to be able to do some technical single track stuff if I'm going slow enough. So most single track stuff, if you have the right bike, even like some of the big adventure bikes, you can do if you go slow enough. So I want a bike where if I slow it down, I can really tackle just about anything that I want to tackle. I wouldn't want to take like a big GS 1200 up, some single trail, but like 850, something like that. People can go on some pretty gnarly roads if they're accomplished riders. But again, I'm not an accomplished rider. So I have a little bit of time to get there, to get to the point where I feel more comfortable on the bike, but I still want a bike that's really going to encourage me to get daring off-road, and that's really important to me. So again, I'm looking for this super bike that hasn't really necessarily been invented yet. There are some options that are close, but all of them are going to require a lot of work. So lastly, it's got to have a suspension that can handle the long roads, okay? The long fire, dirt, sand roads that are just really bad on suspensions. Suspensions cycle up and down, up and down. They're going to create heat, especially if I'm riding on them for like an hour at a time, 2 hours, 3 hours, putting like 200-300 miles on some of these kind of roads. It's really going to wear out your suspension if you don't have a good suspension. So it's going to have a good suspension. And what I've pretty much figured out is that I am going to have to fiddle with the suspension no matter what bike I get. There's a few bikes that can probably handle it, but again, all the recommendations that I've seen on all these bikes say you need to upgrade the suspension. I weigh about 200 pounds. So right at 200 pounds, usually bikes aren't set up for that. And luggage, put on top of that the luggage. I'm also a tall guy, right? So I don't want like a super slung bike, super low bike, but I don't want that anyway because of ground clearance. I want the ground clearance for the off-road stuff. So that's kind of where I am. So these are the bikes I'm looking at. I'm looking at a CB500X. That's my number one choice right now. Of course, that may change. And I know that y'all are looking at that. That's not a dual sport adventure bike. Well, there's a company, Rally Raid Products, that actually has this conversion kit that replaces the alloy wheels with wire wheels and a bigger 19-inch wheel in front, and does suspension work on it to raise the bike 2 inches. So it's got a lot more ground clearance than even like a KLR. And it tunes the suspension really, really good. And that little Honda Twin apparently has a lot of low grunt. So when you're going up a hill or something, you need that traction, you need that low go, you need a tractor up that hill. It's there. And on top of that, it gets like 70, 80 miles a gallon. So you're getting this great fuel consumption. It's probably not going to get 80 miles per gallon with me on it and a bunch of luggage, but it's still going to get a really great, gas mileage. And around here, around town, it'll, get great gas mileage with me on it as well. So that's something that I'm looking at. And I also like the fact that the Rally Raid kit would allow me to do some wrenching on my bike, because I realize as I do wrenching, I'm going to learn about the bike, and that means when I'm out on the trail and something happens, I'll be able to kind of work on it a little bit because I'll have some experience wrenching on it. And that'll be part of what I'm going over in this on this channel as well, is you'll get to see me do all the upgrades to whatever bike that I do get. You'll be able to see me go through those. I'm excited about that, actually. So the second bike, I'm just kind of up in the favorites right now, is the WR250R. I really love this bike because I feel like this is the closest you can get to a single track adventure bike that you can possibly get. It can cruise at 70 on the highway, although it's really ramping up the RPMs to do that. And it really does sacrifice a little bit of that low end grunt to do that. You can gear it so it can be really good off-road, or you can gear it to where it'll be really good on-road, but there's not really a middle ground. But it would be passable. My main objection with that right now is it's so light that when I am getting on the highway and things like that, from what I read, you get blown around a little bit. Whereas the Honda would be very planted and it would have a lot of, it'd be very solid. The WR seems to be a little more jittery, like when trucks roll by, that kind of thing. I'm not sure. Again, I need a test drive. This is a big thing for me. But this would be a really light bike, and the advantage is it would be really easy to pick up when I drop it, okay? Because it will happen. I'm going to drop the bike. So the CB500X weighs close to 400 pounds, about 390 something. And then once you put all the gear on there, it's going to be well over 400 pounds. Whereas the WR weighs under 300 pounds. So you're talking about like 100 pounds lighter. So whenever I'm doing that bike lift, it's going to be a lot lighter. Now, I have read, and again, I need a test drive to kind of verify all this, that the WR's weight is a little higher, whereas the Honda's weight is a little lower. So the Honda doesn't feel like it's as heavy as it actually is. So that may be a good thing and kind of confidence inspiring for somebody who's learning the adventure stuff. And also that low torque is going to be a really big thing, whereas the Yamaha WR250R has, like, you really have to rev it to get all the power out of it. The Honda, it's all just kind of across. It's got a really nice torque curve. So that's, again, something I've been reading about, and again, I have no test, but I did find a 500X that is kind of already suited for adventure, except it doesn't have the suspension upgrades and the wire wheel set. So if I just get a Rally Raid kit, it's got a lot of that stuff already. It's got like the bark busters, it's got like the upgraded suspension, it's got the skid plate on the bottom, the engine guards, all that cool stuff. So that would save me a little bit of money, and it's used, and it's not at a bad price. So That's something I'm looking at, but again, I can't test drive it because I don't have my Virginia driver's license yet. Okay, so the third bike that I'm kind of looking at is the BMW 310 GS, G310 GS. That bike is kind of right in the middle between the WR and the Honda, and they have a rally raid kit for that as well. Now, I am a little bit concerned with reliability with that bike. I'm not sure. It's kind of new. The other thing is, I wouldn't be able to really buy a used one because there's not a lot of used ones out there. Whereas with the CB, I can buy a used one fairly cheaply. This one out, like the BMW, I'd have to buy new. And they're not super expensive new, but you're still talking about like a $2,000 difference if I can buy a used one versus a new one. So that's something else I'm looking at. And again, they have that rally raid kit that switches out the alloy wheels for spoke wheels and does the suspension and all that stuff and makes it really, really off-road capable. The other thing is I've heard that you have to rev it to get power a little bit more. And while it is about, I want to say it's about 50 pounds lighter than the CB, its power is higher up in the revs. So it would be a more skilled rider that can really get a lot out of that bike off-road. And I'm not there yet. So, but again, it'd be lighter. So every time I pick it up, I'm going to be loving the fact that it's a lighter bike. And it is pretty good on the single track kind of things, but it's still not a WR250R. So again, you're kind of hitting the more road oriented one, which is going to be really good for those long, like the CB is going to be really great for those long, like fire road things where you're just going and going and going and going on these dirt roads. It's going to be amazing for that because it's a really super comfortable bike. And the suspension setup from Rally Raid is going to be really good for soaking all that stuff up. So the fourth bike I've started looking at is the Himalaya. Royal Enfield makes a Himalaya. It's like 400 cc somewhere in there. So it's right in between, I guess, the Honda and the BMW. But it is so low and torquey that it's probably not going to be okay for the highway. I'm gonna test drive one of those, and you'll get to see that. So I know what it's like on the highway, and maybe that'll convince me that this is the one to take, because by far that will be the cheapest option, because apparently all the suspension and everything's kind of already set up to be able to handle, that long-term riding. But every one of these bikes, I've read that there's things that you can do to make it better off-road. Like the WR250R, the back shock apparently needs to be like revalved and stuff like that. So that'll give me a chance to kind of monkey around with it and get to know the bike before I go. So the last one is the Tenno 700, which is like this ghost bike that they've been driving across the world. And I say it's a ghost bike because they keep saying it's coming, but we don't know when it's coming. It's like it's there, but it's not. So they're supposed to be like a 2019, but we don't know when it's going to be in the showroom or anything like that. So I might get a bike and then that come out and be like, oh, this is awesome, because apparently it's supposed to be kind of on the lighter side, and being a 700, it would have a lot of power. It'd be on the lighter side, and this is a bike that I could really grow into and tour around the world on. And that's the advantage of the CB and the 700. If I decided to get that, is that would be something that I would want to take on a lot of trips, not just the TAT trail trip. So yeah, those are the bikes I'm looking at. I just want to kind of run over those with you. And again, I'll probably do separate videos on each one of those bikes to let you guys see what my thoughts are about them, especially as I start test driving and figuring out what bike I'm going to actually buy. I've also been doing a lot of like gear research and things like that, and I'll do videos on those coming up. So if you want to follow along this journey with me, it's the first time you're watching, or maybe you watch my other video and you're like, hey, yeah, we'll see how far this guy goes. Subscribe, follow. It'll also help me kind of get my feet on YouTube because I don't have a lot of followers. And again, I'm not doing this for followers. I'm really doing this to record what's happening. But it'd be nice to, have people along the way, to kind of share my victories with, because I'm doing this thing. And I love to have your company along the way. Thanks a lot.